All right, we're starting fresh. We're here with Rachel Haywire. We're doing a very we're doing an uncut, uncensored podcast together. So this
Sure.
is I might have to let my hair down here in this podcast. But I wanted to ask Rachel, starting off, is just how long you've been on the internet. What have you been doing? What's been your progression? I kind of see you. My perception of you is sort of as a networker. You like the concept of a salon. So how did were you just born that way? Did you come into that role? How did that evolve?
Well, I've been on the internet for way too long. Um, Previously, AOL, when they did the You've Got Mail thing. Think before that, when the internet was text based, there were no mice invented. You could just like log on through a library computer. I've been on the internet that long. So it's a pretty long time. I've thrown salons for about 4 years. I started at the Inner Intellect. The Inner Intellect is a community for philosophers and theorists, some tech people, some culture people, mostly tech people. I was always like their token culture person. Had a lot of fun and decided I wanted to do it for the Cultural Futurist, which is also my Substack. And that was about a year and a half ago. I started hosting my own salons independently through the Cultural Futurist. And I wanted to bring the best minds of my generation together, some older generations, some younger generations. I began booking philosophers. I booked some of my friends' bands to play. I booked some performance artists. I even had a comedian at one of my salons. So we do everything from live shows to poetry readings to roundtable discussions, and we mix it all up, and it's a lot of fun. And I'm going to do in real life salons starting in March with the opening of my gallery.
Yeah, I haven't really created I attempted at one point. I went on I almost called it a field trip, but I went on a road trip, trying to meet people from online, but wasn't able, to create that sort of community. And at some point, I got interested in homesteading and like we all just need to live together in a commune kind of idea. And then at some point, I got to the point where I'm like, I have to be kind of monastic. I think I'm probably maybe more antisocial inherently than some other people. So the idea of that, I was kind of resistant to it, and now I'm pretty deep into that mindset of like, just kind of trying to take whatever is in me, because I'm really inspired by Camille Paglia when I read Sexual Personae, and she
Mm-hmm.
talked about having to take on basically like a Catholic monasticism in order to write
Right.
that book. And that was fairly inspiring. I mean, she was the one who introduced. I've never read through Nietzsche. I know you've done some readings on Nietzsche. I've never read through Nietzsche, but she kind of, I view her as like the person who introduced me to those ideas. The person where I
Mm-hmm.
heard that name as something other than like I don't know, an adjective or something, but as a real person with
Yeah.
real ideas. So yeah, I think that was a while ago for me. I started reading. I heard of her through Andrew Breitbart, I
Oh,
believe. I
really? Oh,
think
okay. That was a while ago. I mean, because
yeah.
he died a while ago.
It might have been around the time of his death. It was around 2012, and he
Right.
said, and I was really confused. And Andrew Breitbart, I wasn't reading Breitbart or something, but I knew of him, um, and I was kind of flowing with libertarian vibes, and I was like, okay,
Sure.
why is he shouting out Camille Paglia? Why does he think she's important? It
Yep.
didn't some there was some disconnect, and I wanted to figure out what the connection was. So that's kind of what inspired that, and that's how I see. I still feel like there's a couple of figures like her who almost, I think there's it's like a portal into the future where you're seeing this person who's kind of before their time, but it's not some, like, she never published the part two. Everybody's looking for the part two, but it's
Right.
almost like there was a nexus of energies. Like, she went through the wardrobe of Narnia and she came back with the
Yeah.
book, and they're like, go
Yeah.
back through the portal and get the next book. And it's like, I don't know, for
Right.
sometimes it's not possible to do that. um so
Well, I think it
yeah.
was such a strong book on its own. It didn't really need a sequel. I mean, like you were talking about before, she was influenced by Nietzsche's ideas. When Nietzsche wrote The Birth of Tragedy, he referred to the Apollonian and the Dionysian, which Camille Paglia expanded on in Sexual Persona, and she kind of put her own spin on it and related it to gender, where Nietzsche was talking about different currents of European philosophy. He was talking about different types of energy. And Paglia, she applied those energies to gender, which was completely mind blowing for its time. People couldn't figure out if she was a feminist or an anti feminist or a combination of both. And I mean, it seems to me like Breitbart, he's famous for saying politics is downstream of culture. And he recognized that Camille Paglia was the epitome of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I read her while I was reading, I think it was David Ackroyd or Peter Ackroyd, I forget which one, biography of Charles Dickens. And it's a pretty long, it's like 1,000 pages, and it uses because you're reading through a biography of Dickens, and so there's like this necessity to use. I don't know. I think purple prose is sort of a negative framing around it, but I was really
Yeah.
getting into etymology, and I think, like, that wasn't a choice. I didn't choose to read both of those books simultaneously intentionally, but I think
Mm,
there is, she has published some poetry as well, and there's that connection of like philology and the origin of words and trying to figure out, like, I was just looking at, like, there was a children's drawing of the crucifixion, and it's an image that everyone's seen a million times, and it really doesn't have any emotional impact. Even if you are a Christian, you don't see it and fall on your knees or something. But seeing like a
right.
child to draw that and to bring it back to, okay, this is actually a brutal torture scene that has been normalized. But if you can kind of, Gerard tries to do that, kind of get back to that
Oh, yeah.
original scene, then you can see the original impact, the original meaning. And that's something that, like, I'm very much a believer that these sort of deep sexual forces, sadomasochistic
Mhm.
forces, like she talks about with who I never would have read Emily
Right.
Dickinson without Camille Paglia. I've been like,
Yeah.
oh, this is boring or whatever. But she kind of says, like, no, this is really for its time. I mean, you compare it to some slasher horror film of today. Like, she's got
Right.
that power back then in the 19th century, but we have this projection that, oh, 200 years ago the Victorians were like, they were sexually repressed, and that means that they had no passion or feeling or energy. And she says it's
Yeah.
actually the opposite. It's the more repressed you
Right. It's
are.
the
The,
repression that creates the sexual energy. That's where the libidinal force comes from. I had never viewed Emily Dickinson in that way either. I'd only read the I'm Nobody poem because we were assigned to read it in school, like everybody else. And when she was talking about her libidinal sexual energy and how she was this female force of masculine power, I was like, oh, that explains why some women have this different energetic current that I've been so drawn to. That explains why people have been comparing me to Camille Paglia, is the reference frame because it's an energetic current. And Camille picked up on this in relation to Emily Dickinson. So I also went back and reread her after reading Camille's take on Emily Dickinson. I had never viewed her that way either.
yeah, I think what you said about it not needing a sequel, that's kind of, um, I mean, in a sense, what you actually need is the prequel. What you need to do is you need to
Yeah.
go back to her source material and actually
Yes.
read through that stuff, and that's actually what she's telling people to do. Um,
Yeah.
so
Like
there,
the fairy, what was it? The green fairy, I think it was. It was like a book about a fairy, and it's related to sexual energy that comes out of this mythological, literal fairy, like something like the green fairy. Oh man, I wish I could remember the name of it. But it was really interesting, the sadomasochistic elements that she found in it. You can kind of feel like a Bataille similarity when she gets into it. Just the way that she talks about sexual relationships, it's almost so extreme that you would offend like one half of feminists, and the other half of feminists would be like, "Thank you so much for giving us this level of agency." So she was so polarizing and what she was able to do. Now I'm just like, I don't want to have to like go on Perplexity AI and look up the name of the fairy story that she was referencing, but it really blew my mind when I read about it, and I applied it to other stories that I'd read, and I started to see sexual contexts that I hadn't recognized before. I was like, oh, okay, so that's what that was about. And a lot of books that I'd read as a child started coming to life, and I realized what was going on with them.
yeah, that's something that's. I think there are. I have a friend who was getting into like esoteric Christian New Testament readings where you're going back to the Greek and you're looking at sexual euphemisms that existed in Greek culture that
Right.
if you're aware of those, you can then read things into to the New Testament. And I was like, not being a Christian, but still like, I don't know, is this just kind of, because there is a rebellious element of people who don't like their Christian parents, and
Sure.
they want to kind of like besmirch it or say, oh, see, it's all just about orgies or something. And so I'm skeptical of things like that, but there definitely is. I mean, there is some kind of connection here. There is some kind of thread between mystery cults. And I think,
Yeah.
one thing that I've been introduced, there's a guy in here, I think it's sexual, that was a Freudian slip, sectional archive, not
Oh, I know who you're talking
sexual.
about, the eye funny guy, right?
Yeah, the iFunny guy. So I did an interview.
Sectionalism.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He
Okay, I know who
actually
you're talking
changed
about.
his name to Cosina's Smile, which is like an
Ah,
anthropological reference. But
okay. Oh, that makes
um,
sense. Okay,
that's how I
cool.
originally knew him. And I think he's the one who introduced me to this idea that when you look at Euripides and you look at the Maenads,
Yeah.
and obviously, it's the most brutal, just in your face violence and sex thing that you can imagine,
Hmm.
that wasn't actually what was going on behind the scenes. That was actually a
Right.
metaphorical representation of deep sexual energies or psychological
Yeah, I mean,
energies.
even like Solo, 120 Days of Sodom, it was about governmental power and dictating and the sexual repression that came out of living in that type of era, and I think, I mean, I don't know if you've read The Mass Psychology of Fascism, but there's a theory, this guy, leftist philosopher, so a lot of people on the right hate him, obviously. But he talks about how it's sexual repression that creates the conditions of fascism, because of it's the orgone energy he talks about, and it's the orgone energy that creates this unleashing. Um, so I think that a lot of these films that were coming out, shock films, like even the Japanese films, like Ichi the Killer, they had a very rigid governmental structure. It's very authoritarian. There's a lot of censorship there. So they come out with these movies where women were being violently raped and mauled. And for a lot of people, it was just a way to release the tension that they were feeling with their everyday life.
Yeah, there is. I don't know, this story that's going around about this OnlyFans woman, and she had sex with 100 men in a single day, and people. I've seen. I guess I feel like if I don't have something intelligent to say, I try to withdraw and refrain until
Yeah.
maybe I do. And yeah, it does seem like there is an inversion going on where the most openly sexual people are the least sexual people, and the most repressed people
Right.
are the most sexual people.
That's the problem. Like the whole like Ayala thing with she throws an orgy for her birthday party and everybody has to like fill out a form and it becomes this meme, and I was just talking to my friend about this earlier that poly sex culture has lost its sexual energy because it's so regimented that it no longer has the spontaneity that makes sex exciting. It's lost its element of kink. It's not kinky, it's dull, it's routine, it's PMC behavior.
Can you explain that? I haven't heard that one. PMC.
Yeah, the professional managerial class, right? So the professional managerial class, it's the liberal monoculture, right? It's people in academia or in the governmental bureaucracies. You call it like the cathedral would be what Curtis Yarvin calls it. But the people that are in charge of these systems, right? They do everything like in a Kafkaesque routine way. It's bureaucratic labyrinth, one after another, just like endless bureaucratic forms that they turn sex into that. Like consent forms, that kind of thing. When you're literally filling out a survey to get into an orgy in the Bay Area, you have to like click and check what your sexual preferences are. Even on job applications, or even if you're applying for a grant, you have to like check your gender now, and then there's a list of like who knows how many of them, right? This is managerial. This is PMC behavior. It's not sexy at all. It's the opposite. Sex is supposed to be about the forbidden being unleashed, not about the state, the interference. Bureaucracy should not be involved in sex. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could say this is why I couldn't become trans because there's too many forms to fill out at the doctor's office, and it's you gotta. I have to get permission for this
Not worth
hormone for this
it.
surgery, and I have
Yeah,
to do this
exactly.
counseling. I have to talk to basically what is a glorified priest to get
Yeah,
certified as truly
yeah.
trans, and so on. And so it's like I agree with that, and this is a problem I have with conservatives when they say the left is sexualizing our children, the left is grooming our children.
Hmm.
I really don't see it that way. I see it as the left, to the extent that you have a LGBTQ phenomenon generally, and it fits in with what you're saying about consent and everything. Um, I mean, ultimately, if you want to have higher teenage pregnancy rates, you should just have abstinence only, and you should have don't talk about sex at all. And our parents and
Right.
grandparents' generation were having more sex, and you even look at the Amish,
They're
and
forbidden for, I mean, yeah, they'll do it because they're not allowed to. The repression is what creates the action. But I don't want teenage pregnancy. I'm not into this whole like Islamist, like third world, pump out as many babies as possible. I mean, creating an idiocracy is not desirable to me. I think that the fertility craze on the right has alienated a lot of people from the right. That's why we're seeing this post right culture emerge. Also, yeah, the left isn't sexualizing children; they're boring them. Um, I I don't know. Like, I've never been to a drag queen story hour, but I would assume that it would be very unthrilling. It's not even grooming. So I think that the right conservatives, or they have like a very low disgust tolerance, which is a biological thing. It's not even like an agentic thing. They're biologically low in their disgust reactions, which means they can be walking down the street and they can see like even some street art, like will just repulse them, And I mean, like, I don't want to listen to music with these people. Like, I don't want to look at art with these people. I don't want to do anything with people that have a low disgust reaction. I'm not a conservative. I'm right wing, depending on who you ask. But I'm a futurist. I'm a national futurist. I'm beyond left and right. And I think that conservatives have ruined the right. So, yeah, you don't want to make everything boring. Like this return to 50s life. Like, who wants that? It's dull. There was a vitalist current on the right, but now it's become a breeding contest. It's like, pump out them kids, pump out them babies. This is boring.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I have a more, I probably have a higher disgust reaction in some ways, in some respects, but I also see it as something. I almost see it as like I don't know, like a strong liquor. I'm not a drinker, but it's like
I see.
sometimes I think there's something healthy about encountering death and decay and like
Mm,
seeing the dead body instead of hiding it, instead of like putting
yeah,
it away. Sometimes, and again, I don't like gore. I'm not a drinker or something, but
yeah,
again, in a psychological sense, I think sometimes I've written essays where I'm like, I've decided to go to a cafe in a bad part of town, and there's a
right.
homeless woman outside rifling through the trash, and how does this impact me, and how does it, is this boring? Am I boring myself to death by staying in a cubicle, or am I kind of going out, going to a third
Yeah,
world country or going somewhere that's not very nice, but I'm confronting this difference, this
yeah,
clash between, yeah, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. But if all you have is the Apollonian and you never get that contrast, then you never get
yeah.
that energetic transfer between the two sides, and nothing is
Right.
generated.
So how do you create a new civilization if you're not able to look at the ashes of the old one and see where you went wrong? You can't construct a new Rome without seeing why the previous Rome decayed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in terms of time scale, I have a pretty different perspective than the people who are most people won't really give me an answer, but I'm sort of inferring people are like, oh well, in 20 years things are going to collapse, or in 40 years or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. I look at Roman history, I look at how that progressed, and I think we've got like at least 100 years, maybe 400 years, depending on what you count as. And again, there's a question there of how does one civilization become another? Like Spangler says, Fausti's
Right, right.
civilization begins like in the
Yeah.
11th century. But if you ask somebody in the 10th century, in the 12th century, is this the same civilization? They would have all said, of course, we're the same,
Right.
people, we're the same Christendom. But he thought there was a serious break there, and I think he's describing something very important. I think he's describing
Yeah.
something real. And so I think in the same way, we might see a break, and maybe it's induced. I basically think
Yeah.
it'll be induced by technology. I'm actually more into biotech than I am into AI, but I think AI is going to
Okay.
be helpful for biotech. And I
Hmm.
think that is going to be the break where it's like, okay, people will look back and say that's when this became a new civilization, is when we gained sovereignty over our own genetics, and we were allowed
Yeah.
to have that freedom. Where we really haven't had that freedom to a great degree, other than maybe you get to pick your partner, but other than
Sure.
that, you don't have the ability to tinker around and experiment beyond that. So yeah, I think that's my sense that yes, our civilization is in a sense ending and a new one is being born, but it looks much more like the 12th century Renaissance than it does like the collapse of Rome. That's kind of my take on it. I don't think the barbarians are at the
Yeah.
gates. Like, I don't look at China or Russia as ultimately representing an independent visionary future that we
Right.
could we could say, okay, well, clearly we live in a decrepit civilization, but the Chinese and Russians, they just they're vitalistic and they're full of life and they're they're totally.
People always do that. They say America is in decline, but look at this other civilization and how based it is. what about making America based? I mean, like focus on your own blood and soil before you worry about fetishizing another nation that you've probably never been to. Yeah, I agree with you. In terms of like collapse and Spenglerian civilizational cycles, I think, Neil Strauss, he attempted to expand upon Spengler's idea of civilizational cycles when he talked about the fourth turning. But like you were saying before, like where you are in one era might seem completely different to somebody in the next era. Like if you're in the fourth turning, that could be the 10th turning to somebody, a few generations down, and and so on, right? So it depends on where you are and the civilizational lineage to like even know what point in time you're in. People said that we were living in like Weimerica, like maybe, but this is in Germany, this is America. So America's a relatively new country. We don't even know where we are. We're just getting our bearing, like as a civilization. We're just figuring out what America is. Like Trump, it's the beginning of the new American era. We're, yeah, we're a new country. We're young.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I am planning to publish an essay. Basically, the title is something like "America's Older Than the Netherlands," and it's going
Huh.
back etymologically and looking at when did people start using that term and what is the predecessors to that. And um, I think that I have a very old view of America in the sense that I I'm I mean I think geography is important, but I think in terms of institutions or culture or whatever
I
you want to
see.
call it, then I think America is older than many of the and I would actually say that the founding father that we should be celebrating is Machiavelli.
That's interesting. So
That's who
you're
I see.
tracing America back to the Anglo civilization. You're talking about the European Occidental culture before America was even formed. You're talking about like American influence, and I don't think that's technically American, but I do see your point about the Anglo influence. Machiavelli's an interesting figure that you would pick. People they said that he was the first progressive. I read this theory. I found it interesting, and the reason was because he took the ideas that were used among the elites and he shared them with the public. So it was like, okay, anybody could be a prince now. So he gets credited as being the founder of progressivism for that reason. I don't know if you've ever come across that theory.
I mean, if I were to try to have a conversation with the guy and say that and kind of define that, I think he would object to the label on the grounds that one of the things he repeats is that there is a static human nature, that humans are the same today as they were in the Roman days,
Oh,
and we
sure.
need to return to that. And we need. He actually, I was just reading. He was saying because the artillery had started been using in warfare, and he said
Yeah.
all these people think artillery is going to revolutionize warfare, and what you really need is a
Right.
solid infantry. And he's really about like, the
Oh,
Romans
yeah.
didn't have cavalry; they relied on the infantry. We need to go back to basics. And he's very he praises the Protestants. He doesn't use that term, but he
Yeah.
praises the religiousness of the Germans. And he says, we basically, and I believe he was I don't know if he was officially in a group called the Freemasons, but everything he believes and
Okay.
everything he says tracks with what later became Freemasonry. So that's why I
Huh.
say that's why I kind of list him as a founding father because I think he
Okay.
was very influential on that movement, and
I
that was the
see.
ideology that founded America, and I think still informs the
Okay.
left wing as well.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if the theory about like him, heralding progressivism in is it tracks for a lot of the reasons that you said. But I do find it interesting that he gets credit for it in a lot of Straussian circles, just because of the way that he was spreading this knowledge to such a wide group of people. But it's like what you were saying about how the outlook you have in one civilization will change in another. With all these constant realignments, the reactionary in one civilization could be the liberal in another. the socialist in one civilization could be a Republican in the next. I mean, it's more about where you're standing metaphysically and metapolitically, real politics, right? Machiavelli. It's more like where you're standing as a sovereign individual than like the era of your time. You get like reincarnated as a communist and you come back as a Nazi. Like, did you change now? Like if you want to get into like the occult politics of it all.
Yeah, I mean, his something that I think people miss from him is that he says religion is the foundation of the state, and without religion, you're totally doomed. But he, at the same time, is a total relativist, and he says, "I don't care. I don't
Right.
care if you're a Christian or a pagan. You
Yeah.
just need to be hardcore."
It's true. It's true. I love any jokes too. Machiavelli didn't actually write The Prince.
So I'm actually working through his discourses right now, and I
Okay.
think when you look at the larger body of work that, I'm totally in favor of exploring new evidence or something like the idea that Shakespeare didn't write Shakespeare's
Okay,
plays.
I was just fucking with you. It was a joke. He was Machiavelli. He didn't write The Prince.
Oh, okay,
I was
okay,
trying to be funny. Okay, so I have another one. Okay, Emily Dickinson. Okay, when she wrote I Am Nobody, it was actually written by a girl named Jane. She just didn't get any credit for it.
yeah. So I guess I
Sorry,
guess
I had to do it. I was freaking out for a
well,
minute. Okay, go ahead.
well,
Go ahead.
I guess I guess that's my long view of America, and
Okay. So
I
America
guess I
started
see it.
before America was founded geographically. America has
Yeah,
been like a force,
yeah,
would you
like
say? Like
the
a
Whig view of
national.
history,
Okay.
and
Huh.
I think America was one of the first countries where nationalism actually became a force. I think if you look at many of
Hmm.
these other countries, um, religious sectarianism was much more important than the concept of the nation or the aristocracy, or
Right.
there
Okay.
were so
That's
many
true.
other considerations that informed the legitimacy of the state. Whereas America was really the first state that said, no, we're not based on an aristocracy or a theology or something like that. We're based purely on the concept of the people and the nation. And of course, that spread very quickly throughout mainland Europe. So, it was a parallel. I find it very interesting that you go to Washington D.C. and you see all this neoclassical architecture, and you see the
Right.
fasces symbol, and you
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
all of this stuff that's very Roman. And I always thought, like, okay, the founding fathers, they must have like a fetish or something. Like they're obsessed with the Roman Empire because it was powerful, or what
I think
exactly is the new?
European influence is what makes America so beautiful in many ways. It's the European influence that propelled America into its nationalism. I also think that we need a distinct national identity as a nation now because we have so many great artists and musicians and architects in America. So I think that we need to carry on what our European ancestors did in founding this new nation. That's why I say America is still new. But I like your idea about America almost being like a conceptual idea that was later implemented as a geographical object. That this is why I've been really focused on like this beyond left and right thing because people on the traditional right they don't understand this kind of thing. They think it's like some kind of like Marxist degeneracy to be deconstructing stuff like this. They think we're like overthinking it and being analytical, and then they'll like call you the commie just for like wanting to take ideas apart like this. I hate that. So I think it's cool that you're doing this deep left analysis, actually. And I think it's cool.
I appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to throw out there, as far as the future of America, that I've been pushing is, um, I think that we need to. I think America needs to become the Americas, and I think those need to become synonymous.
So you want to
And
balkanize it?
well, have a North American Union to start with, and start a war with the cartels, and actually bring the cartels into government, because what the cartels are,
Huh.
it's a group of violent people who want power, And
Okay.
another term for that is like a cop or a military general. So you
Sure.
just have to find the ones who are willing to play by the rules, and then the ones who don't, you play them off against each other. But I think
Hmm.
that's a problem that can be solved, because I think people have this vision of South America, which is sometimes romanticized and other times like terroristic, in terms of,
Hmm.
well, you have these criminal organizations, and they're totally, these people are just, and I think Bukele kind of put a lot of those
Yeah.
people to shame, where he was like, you don't need to be afraid of these people. You can just round them up and put them in jail or something. Uh, Now, I'm
Yeah.
actually a prison abolitionist. I think 99% of people shouldn't be in
Oh.
jail, and
I don't
I
know about
think
that, but I
okay,
don't.
I'll explain that one, which
I
is,
okay, but I do want to say though that it is absolutely horrific that the United Healthcare shooter has to go to prison when he had all those back problems and now he has to sleep on a prison cot. That is so horrible. Like this is torture that somebody is suffering that fate after going through what he did. Like if you look at the pictures of his back surgery, so that's horrible, absolutely horrible. Some people are just worthless, as Thomas Hobbes got into. I don't think you should free them. Absolutely not. You should put them all
so.
together, and you put them all together and let them get rape and kill each other, and leave the rest of us alone. Maybe that's
Well,
a liberal idea.
there's a spectrum here of things that you can do. So I don't
Yeah.
believe in a one size fits all situation.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
I think that's and the same thing with education. The idea that all children should be put in the same box
No.
together just because they live in the same neighborhood or something, and so I think that you have to really individualistically look at the crime that was committed, and then you have to get, the first priority is that
Mhm.
people have to be protected from victimization, so you don't release people onto the streets. But we have a big country, not just a big country, we have a big world, and there's so many places that would love to take someone who cheated on their taxes, and
Oh, I see.
so
Okay.
there's no reason why we need to babysit people with a bad
Mm.
attitude for 40 years in a
Okay.
cage,
Okay.
just
That makes
because.
sense.
Okay, yeah, and again, I'm not it, like, there's
So
that
we could
George Carlin.
deport. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 Kill them all, kind of thing. Okay. Wait. No. I'm thinking of another. I'm thinking of Bill Hicks.
No, George Carlin
But
has a sketch where he's like, yeah,
okay.
put them all in a big stadium, put them all in a big arena, and
Okay.
I'm
Yes.
not gonna fully endorse that, but it's like,
Right.
I think the point to me is to say that, I mean, the United Healthcare shooter is his own phenomenon, but just in
Yeah.
general, someone kills somebody 99% of the time, it's for a very specific and personal reason. It's not because they're a danger to humans in general necessarily. It's because there's a specific problem at a specific time. So that's not to say like, okay, they're never going to kill anyone again. I'm sure they could find a new specific reason at a specific time, but it's to
Mm.
say that, like in the case of Luigi, like, if someone was like, "Are you afraid to be in a McDonald's with him?" I'd be like, "No, I don't think he's going to shoot me. He had a
Right.
particular plan at a
Right.
particular time." So I think there has to be a distinction between. Also, we talk about like mental health, and we have a
Yeah.
criminal justice system that says, well, if you're schizophrenic and you kill somebody, that deserves less of a punishment than if you like planned it ahead of time to kill some CEO. And it's like kind of the
Mm.
opposite. It's like if you're a total wild maniac who will just kill anyone, then that seems to be more dangerous than if you have a specific political ideology or something.
I see. I mean, I think that I agree with how a one size fits all approach doesn't work. I mean, because there are different types of crimes and different criminals, and I'm not so sure that it's realistic to like ship off a serial killer to like do our deeds in another nation. I mean, because if you get into like like neo feudal pirate barbarian organizing and that kind of thing. It's like, okay, so this person robbed 5 liquor stores. We're gonna like send him out, to like this nation state so he can like conquer the 10 best scientists and like bring them back to America. You're kind of like in this idealistic playground. I mean, they're fun thought experiments, don't get me wrong. I'm just not sure how realistic they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think serial killers are like 1% of our prison population or something. So I think, yeah, there's a variety of people. I think some people, my idea basically would be that there would be sort of a bounty system where obviously, let's say you're Haiti or the Congo, you don't want just criminals coming in who have no value or something, but maybe for a certain amount of money you'd be willing to take them in. And maybe there's certain criminals where there's just no amount of money or it's like too high of a bounty. And so in that case, I think a reservation system where you can call it, if you want to call it an open air prison, if you want to call it, I wouldn't call it a concentration camp because it wouldn't be concentrated. The point would not be to put
That's
it
funny.
wouldn't be to the idea
There's
is not.
nothing left to concentrate on. Yeah, like there's nothing left to conserve. There's nothing left to
Well,
concentrate
I'm
on.
I'm not trying to like put these people in a deliberately inhumane,
Yeah.
torturous. The idea
No,
is
you make them concentrate in the campus of school where they learn how to not be
I
criminals.
don't
But
if there's for example, and I think
I don't
I had the
know. Education doesn't solve everything. Like I don't think that. Okay, well we're gonna like rehabilitate them
no
by
no
like.
no I'm not suggesting
Okay.
that. I'm saying that I don't. I think people should have the freedom. For example, homeless people. I don't think homeless people, which I would just describe as vagrancy, I don't think people have the right to put up a tent and use the bathroom in the streets and all these things. I think
Oh God, no.
if you have mental issues and stuff like that, you shouldn't be on the streets. But I think these people should be allowed. There's a place called Slab City in Southern California,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
I know some people that did that. I used to like hang out in the underground anarchist scene, so I know some Slab City people. That's really funny.
yeah, I think we need more slab cities. Basically, we need
Oh, I
slab
see.
cities for different
Okay.
kinds of.
So like Mad Max reservations for criminals to like work out their shit among each
Yeah, I
other.
mean,
Okay,
I
but what if one
visited.
of them like comes out? Okay, like say you have like a criminal sector of the United States number 492, right? So one of them is like, oh, I'm gonna go back to this portion of America and like fuck up this innocent person. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think if you're going to like create a sector and like force them all into it, like you need to make sure they can't come out. And isn't that already called prison?
Well,
I mean,
the
isn't that what
difference
prison is
the
for?
difference is that prison is intended as a punishment, and therefore you're not allowed to have a job, you're not allowed to have a computer, you're not allowed to have sex, no one's allowed to visit you for longer than 30 minutes, you can't go outside when you want to go outside, you can't have your own house, you can't be separate from people, you can't earn money. There's so many restrictions on freedom that are not productive, they don't benefit society, they don't provide anything. So what I'm saying is, you should allow people to leave the country first of all if they want to leave, and second of all, if they can't leave because no one's going to take them, or if they want to take the option, we should have prescribed areas. It's actually easy. Borders have never been easier to create. I mean, ask the Israelis. Borders
Oh,
have never
I
been
see.
easier to create.
Okay. Okay.
So you can easily have a border, and it can be patrolled by AI machine guns or something
Okay,
like
but
that.
this is like really fantastical. I mean, it's a great story, but I don't see why you're spending your time like focused on bad people doing bad things when we have ordinary Americans that are suffering at the hands of an incompetent system. When regular everyday people who haven't harmed people can't afford to buy homes because of the migrant crisis, and you're focused on like some prisoner because you think they're based or whatever. Like that just
No,
seems
it's not. It's
really
the same
like.
reason that I support animal rights. It's not because I think animals are base, but I think that it's
But
important.
this animals don't hurt people. The animals aren't criminals.
Animals do hurt
Yeah,
people.
okay, pit bulls. Okay, pit bulls. Okay, children. Okay, but forgetting about pit bulls that maul children, all animals that aren't pit bulls that maul children, they don't go around like committing
Yeah.
crimes.
Well, I mean,
That doesn't.
we've slaughtered wolves because they ate,
That's
the pony
horrible.
of an EU
Oh,
bureaucrat. So
oh,
there's a lot of
oh,
animals
okay.
that
I
do stuff.
see.
But here's my
Okay,
point.
that's interesting.
It's
Okay.
not so much about saying I'm, you know, like yeah, there are moral arguments to be made, and there's maybe there's a comparison to be made of like why waste our breath on criminals when we have law-abiding people who are suffering?
It's
Um,
a fair
I'm
question.
I'm
I'm
not
not trying to
real.
be milk toast.
Yeah, I'm
It's
not.
it's
I'm not really a working. I'm not. I don't believe that many of the measures, or I don't think that talking about the working class, or even like the Longshoremen's Union, like
yeah,
protecting people from automation, giving people jobs, increasing the minimum wage. I generally don't see these as very effective at at
they're
eliminating human
not.
suffering. So
Yeah,
that's why I tend
they make
not
it
to.
worse. Actually, they make it worse because they make you more dependent on the state. Um, what actually needs to happen is the full privatization of everything, so people can do what they want when they want and not have to worry about all the bureaucratic nonsense. So I agree with you um, on a lot of things. I mean, like your ideas for criminals are interesting. I would want to apply it to like more than criminals. Like I want to apply it to every American, right? Like say there's somebody maybe they're not committing any crimes, but they're just like saying stupid shit on the internet. Like, can we like relocate them to like stupid shit on the internet? You know, Sector 549. Can we do that? Can we relocate stupid people on the internet to like this part of the country and like maybe restrict their internet access? I don't know. People aren't going to like that idea, but I don't want to read their posts anymore.
I guess something that I've been intending to, it's been rattling around in my brain is um, like Costco America or Airport America, where you have these private membership only clubs that just get
Yeah.
bigger and bigger, and they encompass everything. So it's an apartment complex with an adjacent grocery store, with a gym inside of it, with the
Hmm.
swimming pool, and it's all, security guards. And
Okay.
there's, so I mean, South Africa already kind of has that to an extent. I think that it is the direction that things are shifting in, where we have less of an agora, we have less of a of
Mm.
common spaces, and people are segregated and ghettoized into their
Oh yeah.
particular social class. And I think that's, I mean, people, obviously Elysium, I think, was like a movie that was
Yeah.
criticizing that. Um, but I don't know that there's much people can do to avoid that, because on an individual level, um, just the facts on the ground. I mean, yeah, you could talk about creating. I mean, I have this article entitled McGenics, which is talking about there's two
Hmm.
approaches to societal decline. And one approach is to say we need to save people from themselves and help them make better choices, help them eat healthier, RFK, save them from whatever they're doing
Right.
wrong.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
the other view is to say, like, well, if you really actually did that, you're kind of kicking the can down the road for our kids to deal with. And instead,
Yeah.
you should just let people make bad choices. Now, if you're going to let people make bad choices, you also kind of need super Costco or mega Costco, because nobody wants to be around drug users and vagrants and people making
Can
really bad
Can I
choices.
ask you a question because I find this really interesting. And I've had this theory for a few years about how like due to the lockdowns during the COVID administration that we're going to see this resurgence of private members only clubs and people of like mind in internet communities are going to get together in person and attend these speakeasies. They're going to pay a membership fee so they can be around like-minded people and they can hang out, read, write, talk, perform, collaborate, have sex, make babies, create like hundreds of different, species, right? Like I had this idea like people that are very high in the S scale, like on the Myers Briggs, and people are like, oh, it's astrology for midwits, maybe. But people on the S scale, they lack the capacity to innovate, they only care about like what's immediately around them. They're only into like, oh, that thing looks pretty right now. So they don't have the capacity for intuitive thought. So what if we just like had a bunch of people that were high in the N scale? What if they all just bred with each other? Then we could create like the Homo intuitive, I mean, there are so many possibilities here. But doesn't the left react like harshly to a lot of your ideas? Like, how do you operate in the left space, if you don't mind me
I
asking? I'm
don't
not trying to
operate.
like
I don't operate.
turn the interview around, but
Yeah,
okay,
no, you can turn
okay.
the interview around.
I'm just curious because you got my deep left analysis, but you seem to me to be more like of a meta political theorist, like I am.
Yeah, I mean that's I think that I just wrote an article entitled Explaining Deep Leftism, and it was a response to a friend of mine wrote an article basically saying I don't agree with this guy, but here's what he believes, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty good. And so I said,
Okay.
I could just tell people to read this, but he references Moldbug, and a lot of people don't know who Moldbug is, or they haven't read his stuff. I mean, I haven't really read his stuff. I've just kind of gotten the spark notes. So I was like, yeah, I should try to put this in my own words.
Sorry, I talk about things like everybody knows who Curtis Yarvin is, but because I'm like so autistic that I always forget that people don't know the same obscure French philosophers than me, as me, and it doesn't help that I'm constantly around people who do. So we've probably like talked about all these people we need to do splainers for. I
There's
I
a
don't want
place and
to. It's not
time.
my job to educate them.
Yeah, I think there's a time for education, and then there's a time to just fast forward and make a bunch of assumptions that people know what we're talking about. And it's fine.
they,
There's going to be different speeds.
yeah.
Different
I mean,
different.
I like to schizobabble. I think there's a lot of value in just like schizobabbling, especially when you're doing it with a stranger on the internet. Like we've never met before. Like I don't think I've even read any of your articles to be honest. I just find you interesting, like especially now that we're talking. But I like just like the schizobabbling that we're doing now, even if like only 50 people understand it. I think there's a lot of value in just like going off our ideas like this.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. I really like. I was talking to someone today about Zizek, and he was like, "Well, what would it be like if you had a conversation with Zizek? How do you think he would talk about you or talk to you?" And I was like, he would probably say something to me that it would be simultaneously a great compliment and a great insult, and you couldn't really tell which one. It's kind of an IQ test to
Yeah.
figure out. And he would say something like, you don't understand how right you are. You're like too dumb to realize how brilliant the things you're saying are.
Right,
Something like
right.
that. So, I think I think it's pretty amazing that, you've come on and talked to me without having read my articles. So I must be doing something. My brand must be on fire to attract you to speak with me.
Honestly, I just okay. So this is gonna sound like Machiavellian, okay? But you like it. I'm so sorry. I liked that you had the word left in your name because I was sick of dealing with conservatives on the right. So I wanted to branch out. So I was like, I'm gonna go on this guy's show because he has the word left in his name. So I could expand my audience. It was strategic. Wait,
Beautiful.
no, I'm not. Now I'm not being Machiavellian though, because I'm talking about it.
No, you
But I
are
am.
being
But I am
Machiavellian.
being real because it's real politic.
But he
Because I'm
he
being open
said
about
it.
it. It's real,
He
real. So this is progressive, right? If it wasn't, I would be hiding it like a conservative. I'd be like creating scarcity around it. But no, I'm telling you, because it's like progressive realpolitik, or futurism. I would call it futurism, national futurism. I don't know. Have you read my writing? I wrote an article called "The Bold and the Brave." It's about like turning realpolitik into realpolitik, which is basically like upgrading the honest conversations that people have without the social padding to just like have brutally honest conversations, but to do it like in an elegant way. So realpolitik becomes realpolitik, and we can create like a new rising class of Machiavellians who tell the truth without worrying about the social padding and conversation. So it's like this brute force honesty. I don't know if you've read it, but I explained it so you don't have to.
It sounds good. I know that you said you might have to go at the hour mark, so I want to respect that,
Yeah.
and I want to give you the floor. I want to give you final thoughts, or if there's anything you're not already recommending on your Substack, if there's anything you want to shout out or preview in terms of projects you're working on, let people know where they can find you and what to look forward to.
Sure, and send me your best articles because I do want to read your rating, and I see a lot of people mentioning you. So make sure you send me a best of compilation after we get off this call. As for me, you can read my book, The New Art Right. It's available for purchase on Amazon. You can subscribe to my Substack at culturalfuturist.net. If you join as a paid member, you can participate in my salons and my book clubs. And you can also just read my articles on Substack, follow me. I'd say follow me on Twitter, but I fucking hate that app right now. I think it's outlived its years. But yeah, my book is called The New Art Right. My Substack is The Cultural Futurist. And please send me a best of your articles so I can actually do a deep dive. I'm really interested in reading them now, especially after this conversation.
Beautiful, awesome, Rachel. I appreciate it. I'm gonna be in a cabin in the woods soon, so I don't know the next time I'm gonna be able to have an internet connection, and I'll still be
I'll
I'll
go.
still
I'll go to you. Or you are gonna pen a manifesto.
yeah, I'll still be publishing on Substack because I can access a cafe Wi-Fi or something. But in terms of
Okay.
having these intimate private conversations, I otherwise I would say we should have a conversation soon, but I can't promise you how soon that will be. But I'm sure eventually we'll have another conversation,
Yeah.
and yeah, I
We'll
will.
be seeing each other.
We'll be seeing each other. I like
Be
that.
be seeing you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for
Awesome.
coming
Thank
on.
you.
I'll talk to you again.
Sounds good.
Take
I'll
care.
talk to
Bye
you then.
bye. All right, guys. If you liked it, you like, you share, you comment, you restack, you subscribe. Um, yeah, this was I. This is fun because I originally spoke to her like back in July or something crazy, or it was a long time ago, folks. And we set up a conversation, and it didn't happen, and now it happens. So it was many months in the making. And I think it's funny. I think brutally honest people are good. I think being like, yeah, I didn't read anything. I just saw you had the word left in your name, so I wanted to talk to you. It's like great. I I prefer that. I prefer that over like a hyper, you know, I don't know. There's a time and place for everything, but I thought it was fun. I mean, people ask me like, why don't you entitle your blog like person who has eclectic political opinions, or I don't fit in, why don't you call yourself politically homeless? Um well, because then I wouldn't be speaking to Rachel Haywire, would I, right? So maybe it's all, maybe you need to trust the plan out there. Everybody who questions me, who's like, "Oh, I really think your branding is off and you need to do something different." Yeah, maybe you need to start trusting the plan. Maybe my master plan to trick Rachel Haywire into talking to me, maybe it's all coming together. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there. The reason I like doing these interviews, and again, I don't know about the cabin in the woods thing. I'm just, there's a lot of stuff going on. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. Interviews will keep coming out. It's just there's 70 scheduled interviews. I know you guys can't even conceive, you can't even wrap your head around that fact, but I have a lot planned. I have an incredible amount of content planned, and I've been working constantly very hard to get it to you, and I just don't have time to follow up with people. Like, I felt very bad recently. Somebody was like, "Hey, we should do a part two," and I was like, "I don't have time. I have too many people on the docket that I've already made commitments and promises, and so I'm sorry, I don't have the bandwidth. If this was a hobby, if I was like, I mean, I guess it is a hobby. It's just a very obsessive, crazy hobby. I guess technically, if you're not making a living, it is still a hobby. So I'm still technically doing this as a 40-hour a week hobby. But anyways, guys, I haven't I don't know how to express myself. I don't know how to express myself in this because I'm doing a little bit of self-censoring just because there's a lot going on right now and I don't know how much I should go into it. I'm trying not to reveal all my inner secrets. I'm trying to keep things under wraps, you know, not give away the game, not give away too much. I'll tell you something I have been doing though. I've been really trying as much as possible to not have Wi-Fi in the house because I get very distracted when I'm alone in the house with myself with Wi-Fi. Very little work. I mean, much less work gets done than when I go out. And so that's really the big issue is that with doing these interviews is it means I have to turn on my Wi-Fi in my house to do an interview with somebody because otherwise I have to go get a hotel, which is pretty ridiculous to go buy a hotel to do an interview with somebody online. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to get it. And people say, couldn't you get an office? Yeah, I've checked with Regis. I've checked with the offices. I've said, hey, can I pay like $30 to just use an office to do an interview or a co-working space or something? And I'm certain that in San Francisco, it's all these things are possible. I'm sure there's a time and place for all of this, but I haven't been able to figure it out. If you know a city and a company and you know somebody who does it, but I'm not in San Francisco right now. So yeah, that's the issue. That's the problem is I work at the gym. I go to the gym with my laptop and I use the Wi-Fi at the gym. That's what I do. I go to the grocery store, I go to the cafe, go to these different places, and I work on my little essays, and I do some writing. But it's not a great place if you want to do interviews. So it's been a big pain. So I'm kind of like I have commitments. I'm committed to doing certain interviews, and you will get those interviews. Not that honestly, guys, I'm sure this will do well, but the average interview gets like 400 views. So my average interview is my articles are much more sought after. So I've basically cut off if you see this and well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to go into it. But I'm just saying like I feel the need to rant and rave. I feel the need to talk to you guys about my situation with the world and the Wi-Fi and the interviews and everything that's going on. But this has been good, an hour and 3 minutes. I'd love to rant and rave more. I'd love to share more with you guys. Oh boy. I could, I should, I would, I can. Maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll do that for the special tier, the S tier paid people. If you want to if you want some special S tier paid commentary from me, monologues, then you should become a paid subscriber and you should DM me asking for that so that I can provide you with extra content. Maybe that's what we'll do next. Anyways, take care, guys. Bye-bye.